Welcome to the Church of Obelisk. These are all the creeps that Obelisk has seen fit to create, and in this video we're going to go through all of them. We'll talk about which groups you want in what situation, what stage of the game. We'll talk about which groups are the strongest and how we can make a lot of plays even if you only get weaker creeps.
My holiness deepens.
If you're looking for detailed and up-to-date content on Chen and other micro heroes, I invite you to join the fold and subscribe to this channel and click the bell button. And now let's get into the video. All the creeps in the game have a level. You can see this down here. It's level 3, level 2, level 1, and so on. And this level determines which creeps you can take over with Holy Persuasion. These are all the creeps that are level 3 and lower. So these are all the creeps you can take right from the start. I've organized these creeps by usefulness. Let's start first with the low value creeps that don't have any particular abilities. So first of all, of course, we have the melee and the range creep. You can always have access to these creeps, but the problem is when you take over one of these in the beginning, you deny yourself golden experience because you just remove a creep from your enemy wave. Still, especially if you're a core Chen, if you're playing Chen in the offlane role, you want to take over these range creeps at the start because these range creeps have piercing damage, so they do a lot of damage to creeps, meaning they're really strong at last hitting and denying, and that's sort of what you want to do as a core Chen. Some people also like to do this if they're playing support Chen. I generally don't think that's worth it, but that's sort of debatable. But in any case, these lane creeps are actually surprisingly strong. They only have 23 attack damage and 21 on the melee creep at the start, but they do have quite fast attack speed. They attack once per second, and they also move fairly quickly, so this is actually surprisingly strong. Range creeps are good just at killing creeps because of their piercing damage, whereas melee creeps are better against buildings. So if you find yourself pushing a tower and you have a creep slot available, you might as well take over one of these melee creeps. You can tank a whole bunch of tower shots and do some reasonable tower damage, and that's going to help while you push slightly. Always worth doing. But in general, all these creeps here, they're fairly low value creeps. If you get any of these stronger creeps, you would prefer them, but in the current iteration of Chen, quantity is more important than quality, and it's just very important to have 4 creeps because the creeps get all sorts of bonuses. They get this bonus movement speed, they get bonus damage more importantly, and they all have at least 1000 HP if you're maxed out your persuasion. So any sort of creep you take is going to be at least decently useful just for right click damage, and that's why we're really going over all the creeps and not just talking about like the top 5 creeps or something. Being able to use any creep in the game that's available is one of the hallmarks of a strong Chen player. So these creeps here, they're just basically inferior versions of the melee creep. There's no particular reason to take over these creeps, just if they're available and there's no better creeps available, you can take these, but it's going to be very rare. These little kobolds especially, and like this little wild wing, one of the advantages they have is that they give very little bounty, so if you just want to use the creeps for like scouting or as targets for boots of travel, you might as well take over these low value creeps. And then there's this little guy. This is a melee creep, but it actually has piercing attack, so this is why this creep is a surprising amount of damage to your summons or creeps when you're doing these wolf camps. And then we have these 2 little guys, the Hill Troll and the Hill Troll Berserker. These are basically slightly inferior versions of the ranged lane creep. The reason they're a bit inferior is because they attack slower and they also move slower. But if you want to have some creep in lane for last hitting and denying, these do the job just fine, and also you don't have the problem of denying yourself a creep as you would if you take over the lane creep. Then we have this group of creeps here. These are creeps that are sort of medium value or very situational. First we have this Wool Assassin. This is another one of these range creeps that can substitute for a lane creep, but in addition also has this Envenomed Weapon. This gives you a damage over time of 2 damage per second, lasts for a whole 10 seconds, and also in the recent patch it got the region reduction, so it reduced the region by 35%. Against most heroes most of the time in the laning phase, this is not a particularly big deal. If they're not currently consuming a tango, this is like an extra 1 DPS or something. If they're consuming a tango, it's like an extra 3 DPS. But it does become pretty great against certain heroes that just have a lot of regen. Like if you're laning against a Husker or a Timbersaw, this is actually quite strong. And this also gives this creep some viability later on in the game against these kinds of heroes, against something like an Alchemist. This actually does a surprising amount of damage, and also it stacks with Vessels, so if you combine this with Vessel, they're basically not regening at all anymore. So this can be quite strong and something to keep a lookout for if you're playing against these heroes that have a lot of regen. And then we have the Setter Banisher. This creep has really bad combat stats, only 8 damage. It boosts quite quickly, but the real reason you want to have this creep is for this Purge ability. This can be cast on enemies and allies. It applies a basic dispel, and if you cast it on enemies, also gives a slow. It slows for 50% at the start, then after 1 second goes down to 40%, then on to 30%, and so on. And after 5 seconds, it's gone. This is quite a useful ability, not so much for its slow, but more for its dispel. If you're playing against certain heroes, this is really strong. Like if you're laning against Darkseer, for example, you can use this to dispel Iron Shell in lane. Also just later on in the game, if there's some sort of dispel that you really need, some sort of ability that needs to be dispelled, this can be a quite strong creep. Then we have the Cobalt Foreman, also very unimpressive combat stats, but it has this speed aura. This gives a 12% movement speed boost to all nearby units, and this aura is quite useful. You're never particularly excited to get this creep, but it's always decent. Movement speed is a stat that's always quite useful, so this is a pretty good creep to add on to your army once you have like 2 or 3 creeps that can actually do something active and strong. In the early game you don't really want this. In the laning stage this doesn't do that much, it has almost no right click damage, but if you're already running around with like 2 or 3 really good creeps, adding on this Cobalt Foreman to really boost the strength of your existing army is quite useful. And it's also a creep that just stays relevant throughout the game. You're never particularly sad to find this even in the late game because movement speed is always quite strong. And then we have this Harpy Scout. This is another one of these basic ranged creeps, but it has a hidden ability that you can't really see here, and it has a lot of night vision. This creep sees really far in the night. It has an 1800 night vision. Most heroes have only 800 night vision, so this sees a lot farther than most heroes, making this a marginally useful creep. Then we have this Ghost, also one of these range creeps, but it's actually much stronger than the lane range creep. It has the same quick attack speed, but does just a lot more damage than the range creep. It has 47 damage, whereas the range creep only has 23 at the start, so that's just twice the damage. And in addition it also has this Frost attack, which has a 25% slow on attack speed and movement speed. So this is a very strong creep. It is useful to get right at the start. You can use it for last hitting and denying. You can also just use it for trading. This is piercing damage, so it gets reduced in half against heroes, but still, half of 47 is still quite a respectable amount of damage at the start, and as I said, it attacks really quickly, so this is a really useful creep to have. If we have the Centaur Courser, this has pretty bad combat stats, but it has the Cloak Aura, This gives 10% magic resistance to heroes and 20 to creeps. This aura used to stack, doesn't anymore, but is still very valuable. So basically anytime you're in the mid and late game, you almost always want to have one of these. It's like sometimes you're playing against teams that have almost no magic damage, but that's very, very rare. In like 90% of games at least, there's enough magic damage in the enemy team to justify picking up one of these little guys in the mid or late game. In the early game though, this is not usually strong enough to be a priority creep. Sometimes if you're landing against something that has a lot of magic damage, you might want to pick this up, but it's generally fairly low down the totem pole in the early game. And now we get to the superstars among the level 4 and lower category. First we have this Hill Troll Priest. It has a healing ability. The way you use it is just you cast this on an allied unit, and then your creep will just follow you around and keep healing you until your heal is full. You generally don't want to use this on autocast because it has the annoying ability to just ignore your commands. So I'm giving a command, it just stops and just kills you and heals. I just want it to move, but it just keeps stopping here. And that's rather annoying, so we just want to keep this off autocast and just cast it manually. And in addition, this creep also has a mana aura. This is a quite strong mana aura, and this makes this creep a pretty strong creep to pick up whenever you need some sustain. This is like never a bad creep. It's an excellent creep in the laning stage, and in the mid and late game it's also quite a useful addition because everyone likes mana. And then we have the Harpy Stormcrafter, without a doubt the strongest creep to get level 1. This Harpy is another one of these range creeps. In addition, it also has this strong night vision that this regular Harpy Scout also provides. It's also the reason why you rarely really see Chens using this Harpy Scout, because it comes in the same camp as the Harpy Stormcrafter, which is just superior in every way. But what makes this creep the queen of the early game is her chain lightning ability. This does 140 damage, and it jumps to nearby targets, dealing 25% less damage with each jump. So you can see this does a lot of damage. Short cooldown, 4-second cooldown, this dishes out a lot of damage. And this creep was recently nerfed in the 723 patch. They reduced her mana pool from 400 to 150, but to compensate for that they also increased the mana region to 3, from 1 to 3, so this creep can just dish out a lot of damage. And you just want to be careful to keep this creep alive because it's so valuable at the start. And the mid and late game this creep is still quite useful because this can still break Lincolns, it still does some damage, and of course you have this amazing night vision that this creep provides. If the Harpy Stormcrafter is the queen of the early game, this is the king of the mid and late game, the Ogre Frost Mage. Pretty unimpressive combat stats, but does have this ice armor ability. This can be casted on allies, and it lasts for quite a long time, and this gives you 6 armor and also reduces the movement speed and attack speed of units that attack you by 30%. So you can attack here, and you can see how long this lasts. This lasts for 5 seconds. This is an incredibly strong spell. Nowadays it also works against ranged units. This is the kind of creep you definitely want to have in your arsenal in the mid and late game. The way you're going to use this Ogre Frost Mage is you generally want to creep them on a separate control group. So if you're moving over the main army, let's say this is my main army, then you want this Ogre in some other control group, and the way you micro this is you just run around with him and provide frost armor to your allies. So if I have this allied hero here and my main hero somewhere else, so what I do is here I cast frost armor on this Venge, then I shift click and right click on my hero, and then the Frost Mage will provide the ice armor, and then go to my hero, and now when he's here I can order him to ice armor my hero and then shift click on the next hero, and then we'll go to the next hero and it's ready to cast frost armor again. Then we have the level 4 creeps. These are the creeps you can take over when you get level 2 in persuasion. First of all, we have the Satyr Mind Stealer. This has pretty mediocre melee stats. It's also fairly slow, notably, but it has this mana burn ability, which is kind of decently useful in laning stage. The way you control this creep is you have this creep somewhere in fog or somewhere out of range, and you cast your mana burn on an enemy hero, and then you shift click away. This way will mana burn and then run away. This is a reasonably useful ability in the laning stage, but it's nothing amazing. It's 18-second cooldown, fairly long cooldown, but it can still be quite annoying to enemies. Then we have the Mud Golem. This has the Hurl Boulder ability, which does 75 damage and has a mini stun of 0.6 seconds. So this is like a level 1 Lunar Beam. But this ability was nerfed quite a bit in 723. It used to do 125 damage, now only 75. So this group is no longer very strong. It does interrupt channeling abilities, so it's useful for that reason. But other than that, it's just not all that strong. If you kill this creep, it will spawn 2 shard golems that also have the same Hurl Boulder ability. But generally this creep is not that great. But it does have 50% magic resist. Has 60 here because of this creep, but has 50% naturally. So this creep survives quite a bit. And you're basically always going to be able to get this Hurl Boulder off in a fight, but it's just a fairly low impact ability unless you can use this to cancel some sort of channeling spell. Then we have the Hellbear, also known as the Potato. The Potato also has the Cloak Aura, just like the little Centaur. Same aura, doesn't stack anymore, and it has much better combat stats than the Centaur Courser. The downside is that it also feeds a little bit more gold, but generally prefer to have this one over this one. But for most intents and purposes, they're pretty much the same creep. And then we have the big one, the Alpha Wolf. This wolf is so alpha, it doesn't only have critical strike, it also has the Pack Leader's Aura, 30% bonus damage. That is a lot of damage. This aura is the best if you have heroes that do a lot of damage with summons. If you have something like a Broodmuddy in the team, if you have something like a Lycan, like a Visage, this creep gets a lot of extra value. And of course it's very strong with heroes that have a lot of base damage, heroes that build a lot of stat items, heroes like Drow, like Luna, like Terrorblade, and most especially Morphling. He just has so much stats, he has so much base damage, that this Pack Leader's Aura in the mid and late game can mean like more than 100 damage for a Morphling. But even if you don't have these heroes in your team, this Pack Leader's Aura is always very strong. Between this aura and the crits, this Alpha Wolf actually deals a fairly respectable amount of damage. It's actually very competitive compared to these bigger creeps in terms of this damage it dishes out. And of course, even in the early game, this 30% bonus damage is quite useful. So this is a creep that you really never feel bad picking up, but of course it's especially strong in the mid and late game. One thing to watch out for is that this creep has 90 attack range. This is shorter than the attack range of almost any other units, so this creep often just gets focused. So you have to watch out that this creep just doesn't get killed if you're doing neutrals, if you're just pushing out waves, if you're doing tower pushes. It will often get focused, this Alpha Wolf, because there's so little attack range. So be careful not to lose this creep unnecessarily. These are the little 5 creeps. First of all, we have the Hellbear Smasher. This has the Thunderclap ability, does 150 magic damage, also provides a slow. And then we have the Swiftness Aura. It's a 15% attack speed aura. This aura is not as strong as the Alpha Wolf's Pack Leader Aura, but on Chen you have some bonus damage on your persuaded creeps. You get 32 bonus damage at level 4, and if you choose to take the level 15 talent that gives you plus 20 bonus damage, you get a total of 52 bonus damage on creeps. So the attack speed aura is actually quite valuable on Chen. And then we have the Centaur Conqueror. This also has pretty good combat stats. It has the Stomp ability. This was recently buffed, cooldown was reduced to 12 seconds. And it has a 2-second stun on heroes and 3 seconds on creeps. 25 damage, that's pretty negligible. Really the only reason you want this is for the stun. The problem with Stomp is that it's actually quite hard to land if you don't have some sort of setup. So if you have like this Dark Summoner, you can use this and then you can easily land a Stomp here. But if you just want to land this freeform, it's quite difficult. So this axe has no boots, so the Centaur is actually faster. But still, even if you manage to catch up here, it's not really easy to get this to Stomp off. So the Centaur is not that strong if you want to make aggressive plays and gank people and so on. But he's really strong at just dissuading the enemy from coming at you. So if your enemy comes at you and you have 1 or 2 Centaurs, you can just easily land those stomps, and it just sort of creates like a zone around the Centaur that the enemy doesn't want to go into. So this makes the Centaur very strong for pushing because the enemy just can't fight into you. The Centaur Conqueror is really strong in the early game and the early mid game, but one of the biggest mistakes that inexperienced Chen players, and that even includes pro players who are not very experienced at playing Chen, make, is that they overvalue this creep in the later stages of the game. This is an amazing ability if you get it up, obviously. If you manage to land a big stomp in a team fight in late game, that's obviously amazing. The problem just is that it's not going to happen. It's very difficult in the mid and late game to land stomps in team fights. Sure, occasionally it's going to happen, but like 90% of the time, what's going to happen is you're going to run in with your Centaur, and there's so many area abilities, so much cleave, so much splash damage, that your Centaur is just going to die before it gets off any sort of useful stomp. So this creep just isn't all that valuable later on in the game. And later on in the game, if you find a Centaur camp, it's usually better to just take over this Centaur Corsair, at least if you don't have any Cloak Aura yet. Because in the late game, this aura just is a lot better because it's guaranteed. You just need this creep to be somewhere around and to survive, whereas this creep needs to get close up and personal, and that just almost never happens in the late game. And then we have a very underrated creep, the Wildwing Ripper. This has really good combat stats, actually the best combat stats out of all non-ancient creeps. Has 4 base armor and 53 damage. That is a lot. And it also has this toughness aura, which gives it an extra 3 armor, so in total it's 7 armor. This is a very tough creep. And then it also has this tornado ability. So what you do is just cast this, and then you want to have an extra hotkey for your tornado. For me that's 6, and then I can just easily move around this tornado. And this tornado does some damage. It does 15 damage in a wide radius, and then in a very small radius it does a lot more damage. It does 45 damage. So you can see this closer axe is taking 8 damage per tick, and this is taking 2. So this is actually a really strong spell in the laning stage. It's very annoying if your enemy doesn't know where this creep is. And even if they do, they still need to expend some sort of spell on this creep to stop it from channeling. So this is something that most heroes just have a tough time dealing with. And like even if they do have, let's say they have like a Venge, but still the Venge has to use a very expensive stun to stun this Wildwing Ripper. And after he does, this creep still has really good stats for just right-click fighting. So this is a really strong creep early on, and especially if you manage to get a quick level 5 on Chen, this creep is quite strong. And this creep is also quite useful later on in the game, because you have this toughness aura. This 3 armor aura is generally slightly weaker than the cloak aura in most games, but still it's 3 armor, it's still a useful aura. And in addition, you of course get this tornado. So what you want to do if you know that a fight is going to break out in some particular area, like you're sieging high ground or the enemy is sieging high ground, or you're doing Roshan, you just want to have this creep sit somewhere near your team so you can provide the aura and then channel this ability and just deal like a reasonable amount of damage. It's not a lot of damage, but it's something. It's also a slight slow. It's 15% slow. It's not the most, but it's something. So this creep is quite useful. It's not the strongest creep in the late game. That's definitely the Alpha Wolf and the Ogre Frost Mage, but it's very rarely a bad creep to get. And then finally we have our level 6 creeps. These you need level 4 Holy Persuasion to get them, so you only get these quite late in the game. And that's also the reason why these creeps generally are not that strong on Chen, because these creeps are really very strong in the early game. You have the Dark Summoner with his Ensnare ability, that's a 1.75 duration root. Doesn't have very much range. It also doesn't interrupt channeling spells, but it does interrupt TPs. So there's some value there. But in the past, it used to actually go through spell immunity and also interrupt channeling spells. So you could like interrupt a BKB Enigma when he's channeling Black Hole, but that's no longer the case. So this just means that this creep is a lot less valuable than it used to be. Still has this raised dead ability, which actually was improved in the last patch. The cooldown was reduced. This creates 2 little skeletons, which are actually quite strong. So you get these 2 little skeleton warriors. They have 24 damage and they have a really fast attack time. It's actually 1 attack per second. That's boosted by the Turbo Smasher. And regularly it's 1.0 attacks per second. That's a lot of DPS from these 2 skeletons. And the cooldown is short enough that you can have 2 sets of these up at all times. Problem is they are quite squishy. They only have 250 HP and they have only 1 armor and no magic resist regularly. So these die very quickly, but if you keep them alive, they do a lot of damage. Against heroes, these just die too quickly to be of much use, but they're quite useful for farming and for pushing on waves. So this is one of these creeps that you can just send out to a wave. You can spawn some skeletons, you can just push out that wave, just attack move those creeps, and occasionally return to this Dark Summoner to raise some more corpses into skeletons. But in fights in late game, this is no longer very useful because the Snare just doesn't have enough range, and just generally roots become weaker the longer the game goes on because people have more items to play around that. And we have the Assetto Tormentor with the Shockwave ability. It has a surprisingly long range. You can cast it here and still hit both these axes. And this ability does 160 damage, which is a lot obviously, and has a fairly short cooldown. So this is one of these creeps that is very valuable if you can get it early. The problem is it's a level 6 creep, so you need level 7 on Chen, especially if you're playing support Chen, especially if you're playing Precision 5. You just don't get levels that quickly, and by the time you actually get to acquire this creep, this Shockwave is no longer nearly as strong. So this is one of these creeps that is a lot stronger on core Chen because you just get level 7 earlier. But even there, the period in which this creep really shines is fairly limited. Also has this Unholy Aura. It's a 5 health regen aura, which of course again is stronger in the early game than the late game. But still, the combination of the Shockwave and the aura makes this creep a decent creep to get in the mid and late game even. Just have to watch out that it doesn't die easily. It has no armor and is fairly slow, so watch out for this creep. Don't let it just die easily because it feeds quite a lot in terms of bounty. But this is one of these creeps that's more like a creep that gives sustain and farming ability, allows you to push out waves, but it's not that strong in mid and late game fights. So that's all the regular creeps. Let's take a brief look at the ancient creeps, and I say brief look because Aghanim Scepter, which is required to take over ancient creeps, just is not a very good item on Chen. In the late game, it's like an optional luxury kind of item, but you're almost never going to get this honestly. But sometimes you like get Aghanim's buff from Roshan if all the other heroes in your team already have an Aghs, or you're playing with an alchemist and he's already given axe to most other heroes in your team, you might get this. And then you might find yourself with the ability to take over ancients. Now you can only take over 1 ancient per level of Hand of God that you have. So you can only ever have 3 ancients. Even if you take this plus 5 for the persuasion max unit talent, you're still only ever going to be able to take over 3 ancients. These 3 ancients are useless. They don't do anything particularly useful. Don't take these. Then we have the Ancient Prowler Acolyte. This has an aura. This is an aura that actually stacks. It gives 10 HP regen and also 10 lifesteal. So this is a pretty useful aura, and as I said, it stacks, but that's about it. Then we have the Ancient Prowler Shaman. This has 2 very annoying abilities when you're playing against these as neutral creeps. In fights, it's kind of difficult to get these abilities off actually, which is why if you want to go for these creeps, you generally need to have the plus 1000 Holy Persuasion minimum health talent, because these creeps don't have a lot of health. They have this buff currently because of this Granite Golem, but as you can see, they only have 1200 HP, which is not a lot considering that they have 0 magic resistance. So these creeps die quite quickly in the late game against any sort of magic damage, which is why if you want to profitably use them, you pretty much need this plus 1000 health talent. Then we have the Ancient Thunderhide. This is a really strong creep, has this Frenzy ability which gives a 75 bonus attack speed buff, and also has this War Drums aura which gives a 25% attack speed bonus and 40% accuracy, so it's kind of like a mini MKB for your entire team. And then it also has the Slam ability, which is honestly kind of weak and useless. You rarely get any sort of value out of this. The main purpose of this creep is just like follow your main carry around and cast this on him. This is a really strong buff together with this aura. It's 100 attack speed. That is a lot. Then we have this Ancient Granite Golem, has a pretty strong aura that gives a bonus HP, 15% bonus HP, and also has pretty good combat stats. So this is quite a strong creep. It's very low maintenance, you don't need to worry about anything. This creep is very tanky, doesn't get killed very easily, and it's just one of these low maintenance creeps that is great to have in the late game when you have a lot of stuff going on. Then we have the Ancient Black Dragon. This has the Fireball ability, which is basically a mini macropire. It can take out a whole creep wave on its own. So this creep is quite strong for split pushing. You just hide it on the map somewhere, pop out, take out a whole creep wave on its own, cut a creep wave, and disappear in the forest again. It also has a splash ability, as well as the armor aura. That's basically the same aura as Baldwin Ripper, but different names, so they stack. And this aura even stacks with itself, so getting multiple Ancient Black Dragons means you get a lot of armor. Alright, we finally made it. Let's now briefly look at which creeps are best at which stage of the game. So in the early game, especially laning phase, these 2 creeps are the best you can get, because you're limited to these low level creeps. So these are the best you can get at like level 4 and lower. This Harpy is of course really strong with Chain Lightning. This gives you infinite sustain. Both these creeps are pretty much lane winning. Then in the early mid game, which I'll say like between the stage where you reach level 3 persuasion and like 15 or 20 minutes, it sort of depends on how much AoE damage and splashes in the enemy team. The more AoE damage they have, the sooner these creeps lose their effectiveness. And in this stage of the game, all these big creeps are really strong. These creeps that have a lot of physical damage, that have some strong abilities, these creeps can shine in the stage, and this is sort of the stage of the game where Chen is most fun to play. The problem is, especially if you have like a bad early game, this stage can often be very short because Chen is a hero that doesn't get experience very easily early on. So oftentimes you find yourself a bit underleveled if the game hasn't gone too well in the laning stage. And then the time when these creeps actually get to shine is fairly brief. And then once you get in the stage of the game where you can no longer really send in your creeps in a team fight because your creeps will just get massacred and just die without doing anything, it's time to start thinking about aura creeps. And this is the final stage of the game, and here the best creeps are the Alpha Wolf and the Ogre Frost Mage, for the reasons we talked about. And because this stage is so important and it's such a long part of the game often, you also need some other creeps to help you out. So if you don't get these two creeps, or if you already have these two creeps, what are the other creeps you want to look out for? Well, there's this creep because of its aura, this creep because of its aura, there's this Hellbear, as well as of course the little Centaur Courser, and there's also this little guy with his movement speed aura. These are sort of the second tier of late game creeps. And then in the rare cases you get an Aghanim's, these are the most important creeps we want to look out for. This Ancient Black Dragon and this Ancient Thunderhide. This is the better farming creep. This gives you a lot of farm and it's also decently useful in team fights, whereas this one is primarily just a fighting creep, which is also reasonably useful for farming. I mean, this is still a pretty strong aura. You can also cast this on yourself or one of your creeps and also boost your farming, but this is primarily just a fighting creep. And then also like these three are also like decently useful. Alright, that is it. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, spread it on social media, tell your friends, spread the word of Obelisk, and by all means, if you haven't already, join the fold by subscribing and clicking the bell button. Here are some other videos you can watch, and Obelisk building, I'll see you there.